Well, it's January the 21st, 2021, and we all should be pretty well unified now after that stirring speech from President Joe Biden. Uh, Very comforting speech, no doubt. Well, at any rate, he's off to a great start, killing jobs on day one. If you're working for the Keystone XL pipeline, or if you were working on the border wall, well, your pink slip's on the way. So thank you, Joe. I'm sure that's what they'll feel. And let's get on with. And meanwhile, the caravans are trying to move toward the United States. It's a great time to start reducing border security. Meanwhile, Antifa's continue to make their attacks on the on ICE offices and even the Democrat headquarters apparently in Portland. So anyhow, well, anyway, I want to mention that it's very important if people want to keep getting these videos to subscribe and ring the bell and forward these to people. We need to get the audience up here. Let's another thing I thought was interesting is they keep I mentioned before in my previous video again in the speech yesterday is great unifying. He starts throwing in stuff about white supremacy. And I did a video on that. In fact, that was my last video, which hopefully people will take a look at. I might put a special link to it below here too. If you haven't seen where it is, don't subscribe. I think it is a very important one. It's more timeless than my daily ones like these, where I kind of get into specific dates and events of the day. At any rate, it looks like he's going to continue to pursue all the left-wing agenda items. And I guess what's really kind of important now is we look to the Senate and to see how the deal comes out and how it's going to organize. I think the Republicans are trying to push for a deal sort of like they had under the Daschle and Trent Lott periods about 20 years ago, I guess it was. Time goes by fast when you're having fun, right? And that would be where you'd have equal committee memberships. And of course, the Democrats would be the chairman, and of course Schumer would be the majority leader and have those responsibilities. But I guess the rule would be if a bill ties in the committee that it's automatically goes out to the floor. That way, it's kind of it prevents things from being blue logjam. That'd be the kind of deal I think they had then. But to me, I'll be very happy if they can get a deal that good. The other issue, of course, is the filibuster, but there you have to have unanimity on the Democrat side to do it. And Joe Manchin still says he's not in for that, last I heard. Although he does seem to be a man under considerable pressure, as he's also making all kind of radical leftist statements like we ought to kick Hawley and Cruz out of the Senate, and it was all for banning Trump from Twitter. So we'll just have to see how he settles out. He's in a very red state, so he has to be a little cautious for his political future, one would think, too. But we'll see what occurs. That is a very strategic thing, as I've been pointing out all along, and we'll have to see how that pulls out. Meanwhile, President Trump is now back in Florida at Mar-a-Lago and banned from all social media websites all across the internet. Even Twitch. I didn't even know he was on Twitch. But anyway, I'm not on Twitch even, but I've heard about it. At any rate, so imagine that, even banned from Twitch. I didn't even know. Meanwhile, Parler is struggling to get back and apparently has got a single web page, which would be modest for an individual at this point. And so I understand they got there on a Russian website or a Russian service. In fact, that might be an interesting idea, is to go foreign to see if we can find any foreign services that aren't as intimidated. I don't know. Well, at any rate, they're working to get back, and I guess we're still waiting for a court ruling by a judge that they've sued Amazon. So I have not heard any. I guess nothing new has developed on that as of now. And of course, that's kind of an important thing too. Looking ahead, I think Biden is making a big deal about his COVID relief, and obviously things are being set up to try to make it like when the problem gets solved, he will be the one that did it, but of course he didn't. The Trump administration is the one that really pushed to get the vaccines developed. And I even think there's been a little bit of effort to hold back the administering them, at least in the blue states, in order to, make it look like when Biden gets in, everything is good. I mean, we're up to 1 million doses being administered per day, and his goal is to administer 100 million doses in the first 100 days, which is sort of like, if he doesn't achieve that, he's really failed, right? Maybe I'd hope they could get maybe 200 million in that amount of time. So, that seems to be kind of, how he's trying to position himself for success, right? Meanwhile, we saw the most boring softball news conference we've seen in 4 years yesterday. So, and of course, the great unifier doesn't really want to stop the impeachment of a president who's already out of office, which is kind of a questionable thing at best. And I don't know how that's going to happen. I've sent off emails to both Mitch McConnell and to my own senators, pointing out strongly that they do not want to support and vote for impeachment. I mean, if they have the trial, I don't see that's all a negative from my point of view, because if the Republicans vote correctly, I mean, they'll find Trump innocent. Law enforcement investigation at this point, as per the Washington Post article the other day, I think it was yesterday, clearly pointed out that, in fact, various fringe militias, Oath Keepers, and the Proud Boys, and there was one other group, I think, had actually conspired to organize this thing days before they ever heard Trump's speech, and there was nothing in the speech that suggested an actual attack on the Congress. So in reality, the blaming him for, quote, an insurrection is completely invalid. Now, if they were to try to concoct a charge that was not based on out-and-out fabrication and was based on kind of a concept, one could argue that his aggressive challenging of the Electoral College vote after it had been certified might be some kind of breach of protocol or normal behavior. And I'm not saying I'm supporting an impeachment on that either, or on anything. I'm just saying that if they were to have one that had some honesty to it, at least there'd be some basis for why they were upset. But in reality, to say he launched that attack on the Congress is just completely false. In fact, it was destructive of his own objectives, obviously, because his challenge was not heard because of the disruption and the psychological impact of the attack. So, and now I guess we're facing the issue of what kind of blowback there's going to be. I mean, the FBI is on a full-scale push to arrest and prosecute the people involved in it. For the most part, it looks like this is focusing on people that got themselves prominently pictured on video or stills, or like the lady that stole the laptop from Pelosi's office and wanted to sell it to Russian intelligence, and people of that sort, and others. The question is, will it expand to just everybody that was gathered outside the building and never entered it? That'll be an interesting question of how far they push that. But even then, it was a very small minority of the total Trump group that actually even went to the Capitol. So I think that, it looks like the court systems could be tied up for some time dealing with all this. And meanwhile, you seem to see a situation where the D.C. looked like an armed camp. So I guess that's starting to dissipate. It looks to me like these few fringe groups really actually managed to scare the leadership quite a bit, which is not good. Fear a powerful government that fears you, because it has more power than you do. So I think that whoever did this was rather stupid. I mean, it was doomed to fail. It was doomed to lead to a major backlash, and now these people are going to be hunted. So, not a good move. The other issue is being floating around here. I hope this is just a rumor, and this is another reason why I think the Republicans ought to unify and oppose this impeachment. Is Trump there's been the idea floated that he'll try to create some kind of a third party or patriot party, and this is a very bad idea. If it was done, it would simply be an effort to basically punish the Republican Party for somehow not getting him elected. Meanwhile, it would guarantee total power to the Democrats to do the absolute opposite of everything Trump stood for. So I would hope that people will come to their senses, and hopefully Trump will. And I'm also talking about the people in Congress here. I mean, and say, no to this whole impeachment idea. We need to keep Trump on our side, and we need to keep on Trump's side. In other words, unity among the conservatives is what's important. There's not going to be any unity between the conservatives and the Biden people. That's a farce. I don't even think they really have true unity amongst themselves. But we need to stick together here. This is a very tight situation. We're in retreat now. And in retreat, the key thing is to make the retreat orderly and systematic and not a rout. And that's the danger. Everybody goes off and gets completely angry about every little thing, every little compromise that has to be made. Because remember, the objective is to keep the Supreme Court intact so that we'll have some court system we can actually appeal unconstitutional executive orders to. If the Supreme Court is completely intimidated, we'll lose that capability. All right, or if it's totally loaded with the leftists, if they did end the filibuster. So we're going to have to accept some spending that's really just giveaway spending to Democrats and stuff probably, and things of that sort to try to hold this back. The things we have to fight really hard on, obviously, is, of course, the key thing on the filibuster itself. But beyond that, things like attempts to rig the electoral system even more the way it was during this last election, with mandatory mail-in ballots nationwide and things like Nancy Pelosi's bill. I think also, of course, the court system, and I think, of course, the Second Amendment. I think that's a big thing, too, to try to block any of these anti-gun measures that they're coming up with. And even there, it's possible that there's going to have to be some compromise. I don't know. The one that's obviously always up front and center is this mandatory background check thing, which, I mean, for a lot of people, that's not a real problem unless you're really in the business of personally selling guns to your buddies and back and forth, which is, not anything I do. But the point is that, some people do, and there's nothing illegal about it as long as you're selling it to law-abiding citizens. And I do think that when you really look at that issue, I'll digress a little bit on it, that when you're really looking at where all these criminal thugs and gang people and all have all these guns, I don't think they're buying them from a bunch of Trump voters, that are selling them to them. I think the people that are involved in selling them guns are people that are dedicated to that type of business, that illegal trade. And that's where the focus of the ATF ought to be, is stamping that out, not trying to harass otherwise law-abiding citizens that maybe, made some minor mistake on something, which seems to often be a lot of what we can't see. And I think that that if there was for instance, you have all these people in Chicago doing all these shootings, and you have people under the age of 21 who are arrested, pistols are taken from them, and they're never prosecuted. But there's a clear law that you have to be 21 years old to legally own a pistol. To me, letting these people all go and just confiscating the gun and putting them back on the street to have them that is why we're continuing to have this problem. Is the laws being not really enforced seriously in some areas, and in other areas, if somebody has a bump stock or some silly thing that's otherwise a law-abiding citizen, then they really get all spun up about that sort of thing. But the reality is that that basically we need to focus on the actual criminal element that's dealing in this. Well, I'll get off of that for the moment, but it's an area I think is important. And but those are the kind of issues that are really floating out there, I think. And of course, another big issue is the free speech issue. Of course, the First Amendment, which of course is probably front and center with the social media. And I'm sort of hoping that court action will eventually be successful in changing the way the Section 230 is handled. I don't know that flat out repealing it is the answer, because first of all, you're not going to get it through this Congress anyhow. And second of all, and even if you did, Biden would probably veto it. But I think court action is probably the best way, is to change the interpretation of it, because I think it's being interpreted in a certain way in which it could be sort of interpreted in a different way, which would actually put pressure on the social media companies to be a lot more objective in the way that they handle their situation. basically, if somebody puts out a violent threat against a Democrat, it's censored. If somebody puts a violent threat out against a Republican, it's left to stand. And what we need to do is censor both of those, or not censor both of those. I would say in the case of a violent threat, maybe they should be censored, but maybe not, because let's face it, that's a major tool to law enforcement. Anybody that puts out a purported criminal act on the internet, why aren't they watching it? That's a perfect source of looking for troublemakers. It seems to me like anybody would openly declare their intent to commit a felony crime, and actually making a terroristic threat, which itself is a crime. See, so I don't know that suppressing all this stuff is necessarily always the best idea. Perhaps just monitoring it and then taking law enforcement follow-up on the threatening cases is probably a better way. I mean, I don't know. I'll leave that up to law enforcement, but I'm just saying, it seems to me that the more data they have on people planning to commit crimes, the better off we are, rather than having them work through subterfuge. And as we can see, a lot of these people that do things like the people that attack the Capitol building weren't exactly the smartest tools in the shed. I mean, they even posed for a group picture. I'm sure the FBI enjoyed seeing that. So at any rate, that kind of where we are today. We'll have to monitor the situation, focus on the Senate, I think. By the way, I urge everybody to, send an email or a phone call or both to your senators in your state opposing the impeachment of Trump. I think that, and particularly for the Republicans, emphasize that this is very contrary to party unity to do that, particularly because the charge that's in the actual article that Nancy Pelosi got passed is wrong. He didn't do that. So he's innocent of that charge. So he may have done a lot of things, but he didn't do that. He did not inspire an insurrection. So at any rate, I'll close this for now, and until next time.